I can remember the feeling I had immediately after recording the first episode of The Superhuman Life. This recording happened in late May of 2019. By that point, I had been months free of pornography and I felt like a new man already. One of the drivers for me early on that led to my success, and I point at this a lot, was my ability to not be afraid to have the difficult conversations with others. I had a lot of men that I looked up to in my life, a lot of men that truly inspired me to want more out of life. And I was afraid at first that if I shared these things with them, what would they feel about me? How would they look at me? Would they still accept me as a part of their group? But every conversation led to more and more freedom in my life because every time I opened up and admitted that I had been struggling with something for so long, one layer of shame was removed. But when I recorded that episode, I had already felt the call. I knew that the story was supposed to be shared. Something inside of my heart said, Frank, you didn't go down this journey just for yourself. You didn't struggle with the things that you struggled with for 2 decades. You didn't fight mental health issues, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. You didn't struggle with addiction to pornography, to drugs, to sex. You didn't struggle with your identity and not liking and accepting yourself for who God created you to be, just to keep this all to yourself. So when I shared the episode, we had a few people in the room. It was at my old house. And if you guys haven't heard the first episode of This Human Life, I'm going to link it down there in the show notes because it was the original story that led to everything that we're doing here with the Rebuilt Man, with Rebuilt Recovery. But I was being interviewed by a great friend of mine. Inside of the room were a few other people. They didn't really know what they were there for. They knew that the podcast episode was going to be recorded. Lewis didn't know all the details as well. I didn't really know what was going to come out of this conversation. But every question that he asked led to more freedom for me. And then we finished up the recording. I had a photographer there with us. We shot some marketing and promo materials that later went on to become the launch materials. And it's still one of those photos taken, still is the cover art for The Superhuman Life. But there's a marketing and network event down in Tampa that evening as well that had a few other friends that had flown into town to attend. They didn't know the story either. But when they asked me, Frank, what's going on? What's new in your life right now? I was like, man, I got to tell you, I just recorded the most epic conversation ever. This podcast is going to drop in a couple months. We're slated to release in July. So what's the podcast about? Man, I got to tell you, I've had a pornography addiction for 20 years, but I've been free for months now. God is changing my life. And I feel a call that I need to share this. Inside of that networking event were a few hundred people that I didn't know, but I felt like I was flying on a cloud that night. There was nothing that was going to stop me from truly changing the world. I knew it back then. I felt connected to people like I'd never experienced in my life. And here's the interesting thing. I felt connected to them because for the first time in my life, I truly felt connected to myself. The shame had been gone. There was nothing in my life that held power over me at this point. I remember hearing the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is you're a person that is doing some bad things. You're operating against your moral code of ethics. That's when you're guilty. You all know it. We've all done it, right? Shared a little white lie. Maybe when we were younger, we swiped something from the convenience store. I'm guilty of a lot of that, right? Maybe in business, we've operated kind of in the gray area, right? Nobody knew about it. Nobody eventually found out about it. It produced some outcomes. It produced a little bit of success in our life. But hey, it was just us doing a little bit of thing that's against our moral code. We're guilty of that. Shame, on the other hand, is when we see ourselves as a bad person because of the things that we've done. And I think a lot of you hearing this right now, if you've been struggling with a pornography addiction, if you said countless times, time and time again, I'm done with this behavior. I'm committed to changing. I want to break free. I don't know why I keep doing these things. The minute you return back to it, that layer of shame begins to take over. And that becomes your operating identity. Is I am a bad person because of the things that I've done. Think about that. Think about operating with an identity that you are a bad person. You don't like yourself. Now, if that's the identity you hold for somebody else, you just keep them out of your life. But when the bad person is the person that you're living with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can you see how debilitating that can become? So, what's the secret? What's the pathway out of this? Yes, for one, we have to change our behavior. We have to do whatever it takes to break free, transcend, get out of the destructive patterns that are producing the negative outcomes in our life. But that can take some time, especially if you've been struggling for a long period of time. The first step is removing the secrets in your life, especially from the most important people. If everywhere you go, you walk around with an identity of I'm a bad person, and you know that there's secrets that you're keeping from the people that you love, then you are not sharing your full self with them. And there's an energy that comes with that. Have you ever been around a person that they just kind of give off a little bit of a strange energy? Like, I don't know what it is about that person, but I can feel that they're somewhat disconnected from every other person in this room. If you're operating from the perspective of shame, think of how many people feel that way about you. So, how do you break it? How do you get out of this shame cycle? Like we said, you got to stop doing the behavior that's producing the negative outcomes. But I think you got to find the right people in your circle. Maybe you don't feel like you have them right now. You need to go out and seek them. Have you shared everything with your wife? Have you shared everything with your best friend? Have you shared everything with your parents? Have you shared everything with your pastor? Are you involved in a men's group that meets regularly to talk about these issues? Because here's what we know to be true is you are not the only person that is struggling with the things that you're struggling with. Whether it's a compulsive addiction with pornography and masturbation, a gambling addiction, drugs and alcohol, overeating and binge eating, whatever it is, there are millions of people in the world that are struggling with these same things. And they're looking for people that understand them, that are on the pathway to transcending this shame as well. But remember, if there's something that you're doing in your life and you are not sharing it, that thing holds power over you. So it doesn't even have to be a pornography addiction. It could be anything that goes against your moral code, but it's causing you to see yourself through the identity of a bad person. We got to break free from these things. We got to find a group. We got to find a tribe. Okay. Over the last 4 years, we've been incredibly fortunate to work with hundreds, close to 1,000 men, helping them break free. And I talked about the 3 pillars. You need a successful recovery plan. You need real coaching and accountability. But more importantly, you need a supportive community. We want to invite you into our Brotherhood Redefined community. We're redefining the way that men's groups operate and work. It's not just about sitting in a circle and wallowing in our pity and talking about our struggles. We'll process issues, we'll process challenges together, but we want to set you on a path of growth, of transformation, of becoming the man that you have been called to be. If you want to get some information, I'm going to drop a link to an application page. It's 5 or 6 questions down there below. Okay. You can find it right down there. It's the first link in the description box. It's the first link in the show notes. If you fill this application out, you'll be redirected to a Calendly booking page. I want to jump on a call with you. I want to talk about these things. If anything, let me create a safe place where we have a real open conversation. If you walk away deciding that our community is not right for you, at least you took the first step in having the necessary conversations. So I'm going to drop that link right down there. Click that link, fill the application out, 6, 7 questions, book a call, and I look forward to seeing you on the inside. But remember, guilty is I'm a good person that has done some bad things. Shame is I am a bad person because of the things that I've done. It's the lowest level of consciousness. Dr. David Hawkins talks about it in Power versus Force. One step above death is the conscious energy. It's the spectrum of shame. Think about that. How close are you to being a dead man inside because the shame is holding power over you? Guys, I hope you got value out of this episode. I want to have a conversation with you if we can help you in any way. Click the link, fill out the application, book a call. But Coach Frank Rich here, Rebuilt Recovery, the Rebuilt Man. Make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio side, 5-star rating, written review would mean the absolute world to me. But we love you guys. See you in the next one.